Okay. My question is for Mr. Woodruff. I have a two-part question. A couple of months ago, the Troup County News posted this large two-page spread about how the county's revenue has gone down. And it was blamed on the fact that the Georgia State Patrol wasn't making stops and they weren't bringing in the revenue, and the DOT wasn't bringing in the revenue. Well, I personally know that revenue also comes from traffic stops and fines and things like that. I also know that the county has stopped making traffic stops. They have stopped participating in roadblocks. They have stopped the interstate just in the rural parts of Troup County that are out there. Is that something that you may look back into and bring that revenue back to the Troup County that has been gone now for the last 4 or 5 years because it's completely been taken away?
Well, let me say this, and I appreciate your question. I don't think we can enforce the law, and I know what you're talking about, with a revenue thing in mind.
Right.
I would never go into office and say, we've got to make money, we've
Right.
got to get out here and start stopping people. I think we've got to be there to enforce the law.
Right.
And enforcing the law, of course, if crimes are broken and tickets are written or people are taken to jail, there is revenue that's made off that. But I would never look at it in a way like, we got to make some more money for Troup County, so let's start having more roadblocks. I am for roadblocks, and not just for revenue purposes.
Right.
I'm out there to make the roads safer for everybody that travels. There are DUIs out there. One thing that I've talked about is I want to increase the fight against illegal drugs and drunk drivers. And I'm for roadblocks. If you've done nothing wrong and you come through a roadblock, you shouldn't be upset. I think you ought to be thankful that we're out there and we're being proactive to try to get these people off the road to keep them from having a wreck with you and hurting somebody or killing somebody in your family.
Right. And that part I appreciate. And it's not just about the revenue, it's the fact that these things were revenue makers and they were just completely taken away, and the blame, of course, was put on other agencies. My second part is very, very important. There are 3 direct agencies here. There's the Georgia State Patrol here. There's the Troup County Sheriff's Department here. And there's the LaGrange Police Department right here. But in my experience, there's a us and them. And these agencies do not work together. And it can impose a large issue. What I would like to see as a voting citizen is I would like to see these agencies come together and work together and not be an us and them. They have separate budgets, they have separate houses, but I would like for it to be that we are all in this together and it's not a us and them type situation. Is that something that you foresee that you could work on that's been segregated for the last 19 years?
Oh, absolutely. And one thing that I've mentioned in other forums, I've told people, even in the community when I've been there, I've been down to West Point a couple of times and went by to see the chief, and of course he was busy or out and I couldn't meet with him, but I've made it known down there. I've met with Chief Moses Ector in Hogansville. I've met with some high-ranking officials. I haven't met with the chief yet at LaGrange Police Department, but other high-ranking officials there, and have made it known that I want to see our agencies all work together. I want to see our agencies cross-train. Right now, if we had an active shooter in a school, LaGrange Police Department is trained to go there and enter that school. Unfortunately, the sheriff's office doesn't have that training, and I want to see us cross-train. So if I'm a deputy and there's a LaGrange police officer to school and I show up, we can go in together and each of us knows what the other one's going to do and we can clear that school safely. The way it stands now, if we have one LaGrange police shows up and I show up, I can't go in because I haven't been trained, and it'd be a liability for me to go in untrained. So I certainly want to see cross-training between our agencies, not just the State Patrol and LaGrange and us, but I want to include West Point.
Absolutely.
I want to include Hogansville. I think sometimes they feel like they're left out, and they're not. They're part of Troup County, and I want to include them in everything that we do. I also want to at least have quarterly meetings that myself, or at least my #1 guy, would be able to go and we could meet together in different places and hear what's going on in West Point. What are your concerns down there? How do we need to help you more? And knowing that along the way at any time, The West Point police chief can call me and say, we need some extra help down here, and we're there. We need extra help in Hogansville, and we're there. But I want to sit down with the top leaders, and I want to be part of that discussion and say, what can we do to help you? What are some things that are going on that we need to know about that maybe we don't know about? And let us tell you about some things that are going on that you need to know about. So I certainly want to implement that. I want to see that come together, and I want to see that relationship maintained.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we move on to the next question, I just want to remind everybody to please be respectful and please be careful about how you frame your questions, and don't use this as an opportunity to attack any of the candidates. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Mine is in a form of a question and information. I guess that's what we're about. Miss Gilmore hit on it a while ago. I'm one of those that has one of those mud front lots that she was talking about. I don't know how many people know this, and I don't know if it's countywide. I do know of 2 subdivisions that it's true in, mine included, and I want to get their feelings, both of them, on this issue. I don't know if people know this or not, but if you live in a subdivision in this county and you have a lakefront lot in the county, the whole subdivision is taxed accordingly. Okay? The whole subdivision. And my taxes actually went down $40. I've been one of those that's been taxed to death for 15 years. Okay? But I'd like to know exactly what our 2 candidates here, what their feelings are on that policy of just because you have some lots in a subdivision that are lakefront, why should the whole subdivision be taxed accordingly?
Ms. Gilmore?
Ms. Gilmore?
Well, I have looked into the reevaluations in the tax structure, and I started with the appraiser's office. Then I was sent to the former county manager. From the county manager, I was sent to from that former one, I was sent to the present county manager, because addressing your question, by the way, about the revenue, the tax digest in Troup County, according to the work session and the appraisers, when it was first announced, was up 6.1%. That's the tax digest. That's after all the properties were reassessed after this freeze on the property appraisals. Since then, after going from this one to this one to this one, the new county manager, Todd Tendler, sent me an email in answer to that. When I said it was 6.1%, he said, oh no, it wasn't that, it was less. And I said, well, how much was it then? And so he used the figure 4.4%. That is the tax digest being up. That means that with all these reevaluations, if everybody paid according to that, it would be way over the $2,324,000 that they've increased the budget for 2013. But now there were 4,600 appeals in Troup County, because you may have gotten a $40 decrease, but I can tell you, you are among a small number of people who got that, and you probably really deserve that. But most people had an increase in their property evaluations. And it is something that needs to be addressed, because said from the beginning, as government grows, and it grows at your expense. Government has nothing, produces nothing that it doesn't take from somebody else. The taxpayers, the private sector, is paying the bills for your government. That's why I've been so concerned about what is the real role of government. Number one is protection of life and property. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot that the government ought to be involved in. But of course, government is involved in all kinds of things that has just grown and grown and grown and grown as time goes on. And so I have really been looking into that as a private citizen, and also trying to get a handle on that so that when that question is asked, to know exactly what the process is. And let me tell y'all something. come when the tax digest is all settled, when those 4,600 appeals are settled, the tax digest will not be up 4.4%, but it may be up 2.1%. And according to law, the county government is to return that money back to the taxpayers. Have you all ever known them to do that? No, the answer is no, they've never done that. But they are to have some hearings, which they were required by law to have, which will probably be, they'll have to reevaluate the budget, and then if it's up, I was told that they will keep the money if the tax digest is up, and put it in a fund. So.
Ms. Williams?
Budgets are fluid. Budgets change from year to year. The tax digest might very well be up after all the dust settles, after the appeals. I was hoping Ms. Gilmore would acknowledge that, you know, what we see now in terms of the numbers is not what we will see once all of the appeals have been addressed. I know I personally appealed mine, and almost everyone that I've spoken with who got an increase, which is almost everyone, has done the same. And it's going to take some time to work through that. And there are many factors that will go into their consideration of those appeals, and they will address them, and I feel sure it will be something less than the percentages that we see now.
Do you think
But we
that's,
have, excuse me,
do you think it's fair though, you know, that they do this?
fair that they do what?
That they tax the whole subdivision accordingly, not just the people that got the mud front lot?
I don't think it has a lot to do with lakefront or not lakefront. It's all based on the proximity of the property. I mean, if, I don't live on a lake, and properties around where I live has an influence on the value of my property. Real estate assessments or appraisals are determined by comparables. That's a component that's used when an appraisal is done, and if it's a bank or whomever that's trying to determine what the value of a home is, they look at other properties in the area to determine that. And I would think that that's what's at play in your subdivision. You know, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with whether you're lakefront or not. It's just the other lots in and around within proximity of where you live.
And they are taxed according to that. I mean, they're told that when they go down to pay their taxes, they are classified as lakefront, even though they do not live on the lake. And it's that way in 2 subdivisions that I know of. And,
Well, I'll be glad to look into that further. It's a question that has been raised, and I think until you ask the people that determine it, we won't know. I can sit here and speculate about why and whether it's fair or not, but we just need to know what's the rationale and if it makes sense, you know?
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This question would be for Mr. Woodruff, and Ms. Gilmore and Ms. Williams, you can chime in too if you'd like to at the end.
All right.
With the recent groups that have come about in Troup County, one of them appeared to be formed at a kitchen table one night. But the one that concerns me is the elected officials and appointed officials in government that are in these groups. Knowing their feelings toward you right now and the campaign they run against you, how will you be able to work with these people once you get into office?
Well, I haven't identified everybody that's in my group, but the ones that I have identified are no officials in the county. The only people I've been able to identify are 2 ladies that live here, and they're just citizens in Troup County. So since there's no officials working against me, I guess, and I wouldn't have a problem continuing to work with those officials.
Ms. Gilmore?
Well, one of those, by the way, is a person named Deborah Davis. The only Deborah Davis I know is the wife of a county commissioner. So you might want to look into that.
LaGrange Daily News has reported that it is not that Deborah Davis. The Debbie Davis connected to this Troup Mothers group is not the wife of Bug Davis.
And I was just going to say, if I could, that I've already looked into that to dispel that rumor. I had never had thought that, and I dispelled that rumor.
Well, the other thing with me, I've already said, I have the utmost respect for the office of the chairman of the Board of Commissioners and the seats that the other commissioners hold. I can respect those offices. At this point, I can work with them because of the office that they hold and deal with issues as I have said. I am concerned about issues, and my issues are not personal, and they're not based on personal attacks. Now, their issues have been personal attacks, and so I think it is incumbent upon those elected officials, if I should be elected as a commissioner, to be able to treat me with respect if I hold the office in District 3.
Ms. Williams?
I don't anticipate having any problem working with any of the current commissioners. I've worked with some of them on other boards. I did not know all of them until I qualified to run for this race, and I've had the opportunity to meet those whom I did not know, and they all seem to be reasonable gentlemen, and don't anticipate any problems working with them.
Good evening, everyone. My first question is about department head accountability along the lines of fiscal responsibility. I have yet to hear any candidate in any race, barring the sheriff's department, and you guys are kind of excluded from this part of the question, because your role is a little bit different. The department heads are telling the commission what they need to perform. But at what point in time is the commission going to tell the department heads, these are your parameters to operate in? Because in any business, if you have a projected goal that you want to reach or a performance that you want to achieve, you set financial goals and say, hey, your department has to reduce costs by 10 or 15% this year. What is your action plan? And I have never seen that happen on the council, on the commission. So what I'd like to ask you as potential commissioners, would you be willing to challenge department heads in cost-cutting measures to cut your expenses by 15% versus last year, irregardless of what your tax base is or what your income is? Would you be willing to challenge them to do that? And if they don't meet that, would you be willing to shop for a new department head? That's my
I would
first
be
question.
willing to challenge it because it's just good business sense, I think, that you not go into a budgeting situation unless you're thinking zero-based budgeting.
Right.
Justify each year what your expenditures should be. I can't speak to whether that has been done or whether that has not been done. You sound as though maybe do you work with the county or?
No, I don't work with the
Okay.
county. I'm just,
Okay, all right.
just
Well,
average citizen.
I have not been in a position to know whether or not the current commission has done that. I would think that would be kind of a priority if you're looking at setting a budget. I
Okay.
also find it unusual that they've not had to do it in these economic times. I know that, all of the cities in Troup County and elsewhere across the country has had to make many, many changes in what they used to do versus what they do currently, because the revenue just has not come in the way it has in the past. The housing market, we know what happened there. Property taxes did not deliver the dollars that they anticipated. So I would think there had to be some adjustments made in overhead and other expenses.
Well, I have been in a position to know what they've done because I've been there. And a couple of years ago, they had across-the-board 5% cut. And I've watched them deal with that. At one time, although they haven't done it for the past 2 budget years, but the year that they did this, I guess it was 3 years ago when they crossed the board, they used to have all department heads come when they would have a budget meeting. And they would last a couple of days. And Bill and I'd get there early in the morning, and they'd last 3 or 4 hours in the morning. We'd even eat lunch with them. And then we would stay and have the budget in the afternoon, and they'd bring all the department heads in there. And one of the ones that was most fascinating to me was always the sheriff's department. I loved it when the sheriff would come in and he would talk about all that was going on in that fascinating department. But they have done that, 5% cut. This year, they have 6 positions that were not filled. They have had, but they did it in sort of a one-on-one. It was announced by the county manager when they put the 2013 budget up.
Mhm.
They said, as you know, we have met with each one of you individually. And it's interesting about that. Most of you know that if the Board of Commissioners are meeting together, if there's a quorum of the commissioners, that is 3, meeting at any time, that any of you as a citizen, of course, must be allowed in that meeting. And of course, when they meet one-on-one individually, that doesn't take place. So this year, that doesn't happen, but they put the budget up on the screen for this year, and then they went over some cost-cutting measures that they have had to undergo this time. And the reason is, they gave, as the reason for this, was the increase in some of their health care costs. They had some serious illnesses last year with some county employees that caused the insurance, their cost of medical care to go up. But it is something that is done. But here's the thing this year. You see the budget is up $2,324,000 and a few cents. But they also knew that for the first time the freeze was off of the property evaluations. And so therefore they knew that the tax digest was going to be up.
Exactly.
Therefore the budget is up. And it's a very interesting process, but your question is taken to heart, that those things should be discussed, by the way, out in the open. They should be where any citizen can hear those department heads come in, justify their needs, their spending. And I asked about the zero-based budgeting the other day, and of course, they don't have that. And as you all know, in government, and I imagine all of you have heard this before, if you're in a department and you're a department head, how many of you have heard, oh, we have this much in our budget, and if we don't spend it, we won't get any more funding.
Right.
And the new county manager, Todd Tentler, said that they're trying to avoid that. So.
Thank you. And then my question for the sheriff's department is, you mentioned that there was overcrowding at the jail, and I'm in agreement with that. With the recent increase in utility rates, cost of living, food prices, do you think that currently the county jail is, the fees to the municipalities are set too low? Are we actually shooting ourselves in the foot trying to deliver a service that we can't deliver? In other words, do we need to raise the rates?
Well, that's something I would certainly look at. Let me say this first, though. Several months ago, there was a new addition built onto the jail at taxpayers' expense. Cost a lot of money, and for whatever reason, they're not using that. And I was told it's because there's not enough staff to run it. I would want to go in there first and look at that and see how we can utilize what we've already got built to ease the overcrowding problem. Now, to your question about are we shooting ourselves, I would have to go in and look and see what the current municipalities are paying. Now, I think we're basing that off of what the state of Georgia will pay a jail to hold state inmates that are waiting to go to the state prison system. If I could just expand on this for a moment. Prisons in Georgia are not overcrowded. They don't become overcrowded. They have a certain capacity, and that's what they run at. That's why your jails are overcrowded, because everybody's got to wait back here until the prison lets somebody out, and then they'll call for the jails to send us so many prisoners to Jackson, and from there they're dispersed out, even to our local county camp here. And through the state of Georgia, there's only a certain amount of money that's paid every day to feed, clothe, and look after these inmates. When these state inmates are still at our county jail, we are given a per diem for them per day. Mm-hmm. Maybe it might be break even, it might be even losing a little bit of money, but the state says this is what we pay. We have to hold the inmates. We can't say to the state of Georgia, this man just got 25 years for burglary or manslaughter. If you don't give me more money, I'm going to open the door and let him out. I mean, we have to do our part and hold these inmates. So I would go in there and look at that and try to gauge it to the municipalities, but I wouldn't want to be charging the municipalities $40 a day per inmate when the state of Georgia is only paying $23. I don't think we should be in it for a money-making business. If we could just break even, pay our expenses, pay our employees, pay our utilities, then that's where we need to be. It would be good to make some revenue off that, but I don't see how we could, at today's prices, actually be a revenue-generating idea in holding these inmates. But I would look into that.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to let everybody know that I got a text message from Troup Foster, and he says that he had a last-minute family situation that came up, and he regrets not being able to be here tonight.
Well, hi, my question is for you, Ms. Gilmore. Sorry, it seems like you've been picked on a lot tonight. I know as a conservative Republican, and specifically a Tea Party Republican, part of your agenda, as you've explained, has been about limiting government to its essentials, things like fire and police protection. I'm wondering, where do things like senior centers, for example, fall into that? And would you want to defund that and it go something that would be done privately? How do those sorts of things that are currently under the guise of government, where would that fall under your vision?
Well, first of all, that falls under the vision of the charter of Troup County. It must be funded. I don't know if you know that or not, but it has to be funded. And of course, it has been supplemented a lot, of course, by the Callaway Foundation, as you know, and also by the hard-working efforts of fundraising on the part of seniors, if you're talking about the senior population that enjoys that beautiful facility. That, like I say, it must be funded in the budget. The rec center has been, and the recreation itself, is a revenue-producing entity. It actually covers a lot of the overhead. And Mr. Woodruff has had rumors about his candidacy. There have been rumors about mine as well. And in fact, when I met with Todd Tentler the other day, the new county manager, I asked him if he had spread rumors that if I were elected, that I would do away with the senior center. I would do away with the recreation department, and everybody would be volunteers. And of course, there's not an ounce of truth to that. And of course, he denied spreading such a rumor as well. And I was glad to hear him say that he didn't have anything to do with it. And so that, of course, is not something that a commissioner could do. And under the budget and its funding and its charter, it is something that has to be funded. Now, on the other hand, I do believe that the function of government in our lives is protection of life and property primarily. And that means it's wonderful to have a senior center, and it is absolutely a beautiful facility. And the seniors enjoy an awful lot of wonderful activities that they have for seniors there. And the rec department, it's just marvelous for the children. But when it comes down to the protection, I believe that you'd rather have a sheriff's department. I mean, when we get a list of priorities, because if Mr. Woodruff is the sheriff and he is out and he has arrested a criminal, and that criminal is put in a jail, I think we have to fund the jail to put the criminal in, and then whatever the crime is, he needs a courtroom and he needs a judge. Those things, to me, are the priorities of government. The fire department, and if my opponent were here, we'd talk about the fire department and how important that is as the role of government, protecting property. And then we talk about collecting taxes, the tax commissioner's office, and tax appraiser's office and those things. These are functions of government that are absolutely necessary because the individual can't provide those things for themselves. Is it wonderful to have these marvelous facilities that we so enjoy? Of course, they're wonderful to have. But when it comes to the priorities of government, and when I say taxation for the essentials, we all have budgets of our own. And isn't it wonderful to have a pool in our yard? But you know what? Back when the unemployment here was about 17%, and people are losing their homes, and people don't have jobs, and people wanted, the government wanted to tax us some more for a indoor swimming pool down in West Point, or bike trails, or fixing up dilapidated houses and all of that. And the list of priorities, that's what I'm about. And so those things are nice to have. But the economy has to grow first in the county. Free enterprise growing, that is where people invest their own capital into private business, because government, as I said before, has nothing that it doesn't take from the individuals and from the private sector. If the government goes up here and the private sector is down here, there has to be priorities in here. And let's hope the county is going to grow, and I would certainly promote private business. Thanks for the question. I think it's great.
And I do have a follow-up, and
Okay.
please forgive my ignorance in this regard, but you mentioned that, like, the senior citizen, that's part of the county charter. Is changing that something within the realm that the commissioners could do? Like, if you were talking about picking your battles and what's priority, is that something that you could look at down the road and say, yeah, we need to cut this in favor of those more important things?
That would be an extreme thing to do in looking at a budget.
But that would be within
And it would be an
your realm.
extremely difficult thing to do. Changing a charter is an extremely difficult thing to do.
It's a statement.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's a state, it is, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is to Mr. Wood. As we know, the system is full of young people without education. If you are elected sheriff, what could you do to help the young people that are incarcerated to get a good education? What plans could you put forward to help them?
Thank you for that question. And let me say this. I think an education is paramount to these young people getting back out and getting a good job and staying off the streets and really being a functioning member of society. However, our problem is, and we've talked about this before, many times when a person is in jail, especially if they're going to get a GED, they're not in jail long enough to complete that program. I had talked with some people at West Georgia Tech. At the prison, we do have GED classes taught because they're there for longer periods of time. An example would be if a young man comes in and he's in there for shoplifting, and he's in there for 3 months while he's waiting to go to court, he can't make bond, we can start the GED process, but then whenever he bonds out, unless he follows up with it on his own, then all of that's gone. And the people that want to come teach it like to see it finish from start to finish and actually see some people graduate. I wouldn't be against it, but I think it's very frustrating to the instructors that come and they've got a class and now it's a new student, now I've got to go back and start over with him, and it's just never a way to get it finished because usually in the jail the length of stay is so short they cannot complete that process. But I am for educating our young people and helping them.
Okay, but then they're out on probation.
Mhm.
So is there any way that can carry over from the jail to the person that's handling them, dealing with probation, for them to get that GED, to put some type of policy or rule to say, hey, you must get your GED as long as you're on probation?
Right. Now, Judge Little, of course, is all for education. Judge Little is all for them being productive members of society. And they already have to do several things, on probation, maybe community service, maybe repayment of a fine, which they've got to have a job to do that, maybe attending drug classes. It would strictly be up to Judge Little to make that a condition of their probation. The question arises then is this: if they do everything else and they don't complete the GED because they say, look, between community service, between going to school, between working on my job, looking after my family, I just don't have time to go to class right now, would that be something that we would want to revoke them and throw them back in jail because they didn't do that? And if you make it a condition of probation and they don't do it, then they have to come back in front of the judge and possibly be reincarcerated for violating their probation. So she might strongly recommend it. She could certainly order it. I think anything that she could order. But the question arises then, if they can't do it, do we throw them back in jail for not doing it?
Well, you throw them back in jail when they don't pay their fine or when they don't do their community service. So why can't that be added?
Well,
to
and
it?
I'm saying she could certainly do that. She could certainly do it. And understand, I'm for it. I mean, I'm for education. I'm for them getting a good job and becoming productive members of society. I'm for rehabilitation. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Looks like we have 5 more minutes left, and that's probably just enough time for one more question.
This is for the shaft candidate as well as the 2 representatives for District 3. We have talked a lot about a citizen review board for the shaft department. Citizen review board, if you were elected, would you be interested in putting a citizen review board for the shaft department? If so, then I would like to know.
Thank you for the question. Let me say I would be glad to sit down with leaders of our community and discuss a citizens review board. I would want to know the legalities through our county attorney of what they could do and couldn't do, especially if it was something that might involve a lawsuit. We would want to make sure that we were going along the legal steps. I wouldn't want to be hiding anything. I would be openly transparent to anything that the citizens would want to know. I certainly would entertain that notion that we could certainly look at putting one in place. I would not be totally against it.
Before I move to the candidate in District 3, to hold the officers to a higher standard, if they do error, would you be interested in bringing the FBI, GBI in to do an investigation within a serious complaint within the sheriff department?
Certainly. Certainly. Anything. Now, of course, within the police department, within the sheriff's office, within the Georgia State Patrol, they have their own internal affairs investigations for small complaints, minor complaints. But anything that's serious, I would not have a problem at all. And I think it'd be the smart thing to do is call in the GBI.
Yes.
Or the FBI to look at us, because it's hard, especially for the citizens. We don't want to be judging ourselves. We would want an independent agency to come in and look at that and make a determination.
Thank you. This is for the District 3. If elected, either one of you elected, would you be interested in putting a commissioner meetings on TV?
Oh, yes, I've already said I would love that. I think it would be a great idea. I think the citizens of Troup County are not well served by not having TV for their commission boards and the work sessions as well. I think that would be a wonderful idea, and I have asked about that and would hope that that would be something that would be made available to the citizens of Troup County. And I think it can be done, too, without a great deal of money, because I found out that it is the city of LaGrange that actually controls the technology, and they, of course, have that capability at the city of LaGrange, and it could easily be done in the Troup County government as well, with just a good tech who knows how to do that, and because I think the facility, the equipment is there to do it.
Ms. Wood?
Miss,
I would have no objections to those meetings being televised. I don't think it would be a very expensive proposition, but it would have to be budgeted for, and I would certainly support that. I think transparency in government is a must. Also, in response to the question about the citizen review panel, I think you said that was a question for the 3 of us?
yes,
Right.
it could go.
Okay. Considering some situations that are going on currently in the West Point area with regard to the police department, as well as the incident that occurred recently involving the sheriff. I think if we had a countywide citizens review panel, that incident, as well as what's going on in West Point, could be reviewed. An investigation could hopefully address the problem and eliminate it. I think it's very important that it not be on an individual municipality basis. In other words, West Point have their own, LaGrange, Hogansville, what have you. I think a county-wide review panel would be very, very effective. And in serious situations, an external organization like the GBI being brought in is certainly appropriate. It's very, very hard to audit yourself, I think, and fairly and objectively conclude.
The core of that question, I asked it to Commissioner for District 3. Now, would you be interested in taking the commission meeting to the public, out in the community town hall meeting? Because we got past history of not really hearing what people's really saying or how they saying it. And during election time, we get an opportunity to see faces, and we go back in that hiding place. If either one, the two in District 3 is elected, would they be interested in having town hall meeting to where they can reach the core of the people, that they can hear the heart of the people, what's really being said?
Well, I certainly would, and that's the whole point of being a representative for the people, is being able to communicate with them. I think on the other side of that, it's incumbent upon the citizen to be interested enough to want to come, if they have the time available, to come also to the commission meetings and to the work sessions. These meetings are open to the public. And what I've found is that there's not a whole lot of interest in that on the part of the citizens. And I've been to a few at the city council, and I don't see a lot of participation there with city residents. But you don't know what's going on out there unless you interact with the community.
We are out of
I think-
time, Ms. Williams. Would you like to
Yeah,
comment?
quickly, I think we have to listen to our constituents, and if majority of people are interested in that, by all means, we need to respond. If it's inconvenient because of the timing of the meetings for people to attend in LaGrange at the Government Center, we need to do what we can do to make it convenient for them, but only if it's something that is called for by the people. It doesn't make sense to me to try to second guess what citizens want. If they bring that to us and that's something that is requested by a majority, and by all means, we need to